Doug Showalter, CEO of AE, heard a faint zing, heralding the receipt of a message from the crew. Arrival at 10 o'clock. Once upon a time, that message had been transmitted over the intercom. After the pandemic, times had changed. Now it was about Teams, email, or Slack. Employees, starting with the CEO, were not to use any other form of one communication so that all communications were controlled by the court. No texting, and certainly no Snapchat. Not for the first time, Doug silently cursed his predecessor's name and his legacy of sexual harassment, which was part of the same Me Too movement that sent Harvey Weinstein to prison. The courts made sure that Ascendant was a safe work environment for women. Safe and profitable at the same time. Two goals that were often at odds with each other. Fortunately for Doug, he had succeeded at both, and sexual harassment, while not completely eradicated, was becoming less and less of an issue, thanks in large part to creatives like his next visitor. "Send them in, Jocelyn." Doug stood up and walked around his desk. His visitor had become too important to the success of AE not to meet him at the door. Jocelyn led them through the door into Doug's spacious, modern, brightly lit office overlooking the hills surrounding Los Angeles. "Tyler, good to see you, brother." "Good morning, Andy," he addressed the men. Tyler was Tyler Sherman, creator and host of the most successful scripted series on television. He was accompanied by Andy Daniels, Senior Vice President of Streaming at Ascendant. Doug led them over to a white leather conversation chair in the corner. "What can I get you guys? Coffee? Coca-Cola?" Both men declined drinks, and Jocelyn smiled at them all, telling them to let her know if they needed anything. Despite her beauty, Jocelyn had a very professional and business-like approach to her job, but it was impossible to hide the fact that she had an amazing body. Doug noticed that neither Tyler nor Andy turned to look at her as she left. Times are definitely changing, he thought, not without some sense of satisfaction. "So, Tyler, how are things at the ranch?" The ranch in question was the Straight Flush Ranch in Central Texas, where Tyler's most popular TV show, The Captain, was filmed. It was a heavily fictionalized version of the life of Scottish sea captain Angus McQueen, who left the sea life to establish a Texas ranch. At over 800,000 acres, the McQueen Ranch was the largest ranch in the United States and one of the largest in the world, although there are ranches in Argentina and Australia that surpass McQueen, as he was popularly known. Although some exterior scenes were filmed at McQueen's ranch, the bulk of the filming took place at Straight Flush Ranch, owned by Tyler Sherman. Fictionalized stories about the McQueen Ranch have been filmed before, but in the case of The Captain, the series was filmed with the full cooperation of the McQueen family. Under the terms of the contract with Ascendant, the McQueen family retained all merchandising rights. They were very happy with their deal, and Ascendant got the most popular show on television. Tyler created a spin-off of The Captain, which was a huge success on Ascendant's streaming service. This gave a boost to AE's streaming plans and gave them a significant advantage over their competitors in the streaming war. "Well, we're almost done," Tyler grumbled. Although Tyler had been working in Hollywood for 20 years, he retained the speech and mannerisms of a ranch kid. Tall, agile, and square-jawed, he had tried his hand at acting, but despite small movie roles and occasional appearances in a few television series, his acting career never took off. Fortune smiled on him when he tried his hand as a screenwriter. Of his first 3 screenplays, 2 of them were nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. The screenplay that was not nominated was a movie that Tyler also directed. It performed modestly at the box office, but gained hot popularity on streaming services. That led to a deal with AEE. "All that's left is to finish cutting the last 3 episodes," he says, referring to the editing process. "So we're on time for the premiere of the first episode?" Andy asked. Was there any doubt? Tyler was steering the ship and everyone knew it. "I can't wait for it to start," said Doug. "I'm as big a fan as anyone." He leaned back in his chair and looked at Tyler, who seemed to have a slight smirk on his face. "What's really on your mind, Tyler?" he asked. Tyler smirked. "I need 200 million from you boys, give or take." Andy's mouth dropped open in shock. 200 million, he squeaked. "Dollars?" "Give or take," Tyler confirmed. "That's a big number even for you," Doug said. Tyler was good, but expensive. Most of his shows were filmed on his Texas ranch, for which he charged a per diem. Every cow and horse used in filming was also paid a per diem rate. All the wranglers, veterinarians, and extra cowboys worked on Tyler's ranch, and their wages were also included in the cost of filming. Even the guy who shoed the horses, a blacksmith, as AEE's accountants found out, was paid at cost price. Tyler was making money through hard work, but with the results he was giving AEE, no one was complaining, so he wasn't as shocked as his VP of streaming production. What's on your mind? Tyler reached for the leather briefcase he'd set on the floor as soon as he took his seat. He pulled out 2 paperback books and held one out to Doug and Andy each. Lawyers? Doug read the title of the book aloud. $200 million for a TV show about lawyers? Andy groaned in frustration. He'd been persuaded to lick the ass of his biggest talents, but damn lawyers? Not just about lawyers, but about a certain group of lawyers. Have you ever heard of Bonham McLeod Garcia? No, Andy said. Yes, said Doug. Andy looked at him in surprise. Doug only smiled. B. McGee. We used them in Texas when we needed local representation. They're big and nice and expensive. God, they're expensive. Doug shook his head, remembering his dealings with B. McGee. First, they had refused to represent AEE in a wrongful death suit brought by the family of an extra who died on the set of a movie being filmed in Dallas. Only when AEE was able to convince the partners of their innocence by proving that the death was caused by the extras being on set while under the influence of alcohol did they agree to take the case. This is the oldest law firm in Texas and one of the oldest in the United States. Congressmen, senators, Supreme Court justices, and 1 vice president have come out of B. McGee, not to mention a whole host of district and appellate court judges. They have a reputation for honesty and integrity that no other firm can match, Tyler explained. Doug nodded his head in agreement. Okay, but how does that make for interesting television? Why are people going to watch a show about a bunch of Texas lawyers every week? Tyler pointed to the books he handed them. This is my source material, and it's good. Doug flipped through the thick novel. Tell me how it's done. 2 brothers came to Texas from South Carolina in 1834. Their names were James and Robert Bonham. They opened their law office in what is now Austin, Texas. They quickly joined a group that favored Texas independence. Eventually, they split up and continued the fight. Robert joined General Sam Houston and was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. James joined their cousin Colonel William Travis, where he was promoted to major. Doug raised the index finger of his right hand, stopping Tyler. Travis was the commanding officer at the Alamo along with Bowie and Crockett, right? Tyler nodded his head. Actually, Bonham left the Alamo on a mission for Travis. He sneaked through the Mexican army and delivered a message to Sam Houston. He then returned to the Alamo through the Mexican army to fight and die with his comrades. After the war and Texas independence, Robert returned to practicing law. He married and had children. His oldest daughter married a Scottish immigrant named Alexander MacLeod. He studied law and eventually became a partner. And G. It was Garcia, Gary asked. Tomas Antonio Garcia. His father had saved Robert's life at the Battle of San Jacinto, where the Texans had defeated Mexican General Santa Anna. Thomas's father was killed in that battle. Robert took it upon himself to pay for the education of Thomas and his sister Angelica, who were teenagers at the time of their father's death. Thomas studied law and entered the service of Bonham McLeod, who eventually became B. McGee. Robert was only 10 years older than Angelica. When his first wife died in childbirth, he married Angelica. Pretty incestuous law firm, isn't it? Andy snorted. Tyler squinted an eyebrow and Doug looked at Andy with mild irritation. Andy held up his hands. He realized this was a passion project for Tyler, and he'd better keep his usual Hollywood sarcasm in check. The book traces the firm's journey through the establishment of Texas as a republic and then as a state. It then covers slavery, the Civil War, Reconstruction, the rise of cattle empires, the development of the oil and gas industry, the space race, and the 1960s. They are just as powerful, if not more so, than they were 50 years ago. Their history is the most Texan of them all. Can you name another law firm where the lawyers have been in gunfights with bandits, rednecks, and Comanches? Wow, Andy said. That sounded a lot more interesting than watching some Wall Street lawyer talk about arbitration. Any unexpected casting choices? Doug asked. Tyler shocked Hollywood with his casting choices for one of the Captain spin-offs. He chose retired two-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Kyle Kinsler and his wife Megan Bond Kinsler, a beauty who is also a former captain of the U.S. women's national soccer team. These two have starred in commercials and guest stars in TV sitcoms, usually playing some version of themselves, and therefore received their SAG cards. However, they were not actors and did not claim to be. They accepted the roles thinking it would be an adventure. But they were duped even more. Tyler put them through 6 months of acting classes and a month-long cowboy college to prepare them for a role in a 19th century saga. Critics agreed that they both acted more than adequately. Kyle was more believable than Megan, but their on-screen chemistry was electric and flowed off-screen. Tyler shrugged slightly. Mark Tibbs has signed on to play James Bonham. He'll appear in the first 2 episodes. Tibbs? You have Mark Tibbs? Andy asked excitedly. Mark Tibbs had recently won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Can you extend his role for a few episodes? Not since he died at the Alamo, no. As soon as he died, he died. No zombies are planned for the Alamo, Tyler said in an indifferent tone. Who do you have on Robert? Doug asked. I have a few ideas of who I want to play the role of young Robert. That decision will depend on who will play the role of the older Robert. I have an idea that I'm running through my head of who I want. If things work out the way I hope they will, then I will make a decision on who will play the role of young Robert. Tyler leaned back in his chair and began to carelessly examine his fingernails before giving the scoop. Maria Elena Montoya has signed on to play Robert's wife, Angelica. Doug and Andy looked at Tyler in amazement. How? They asked in one voice. She supposedly retired from the acting profession when her husband died. Didn't she go into seclusion with her family? Doug asked. Maria Elena Montoya was the eldest daughter of the younger sister of King Juan Tomás Vega Montoya of Spain. After college, she modeled in Paris and London before being offered a role as an actress. She found that she enjoyed acting more than modeling. She took her new craft seriously, taking theater classes and gaining experience by auditioning for Broadway plays. It paid off. She was twice nominated for an Oscar, but she never received it, although everyone realized that it was only a matter of time. Until an accident happened. Maria was pregnant with her husband's first child, Formula One driver Jean-Pierre Degas, when he lost control of his car at the Bahrain Grand Prix and crashed into a wall. He died from the impact. Maria was watching the race from her hotel room and saw the collision and the resulting fireball. She immediately realized that her husband was dead. That same night, she suffered a miscarriage. She was flown to Spain on a chartered plane and heavily sedated. She spent 3 years in seclusion and did not appear in public until recently. Her agent and manager turned down anyone who approached her. At Christmas, she was photographed at Mass with members of the Spanish royal family. It was her first public appearance since her husband's memorial service. The fact that Tyler had mentioned in passing that she had returned to acting thanks to his TV series stunned Doug and Andy. Wow, okay. I guess we're okay with a sequel. And your source material? Is it reliable? Doug asked. He picked up the book and looked at the cover. Who's the author? Jack McLeod? I take it he's related to McLeod from BMG? Tyler nodded his head. He's related. Everyone in the family either becomes a lawyer or goes into the military. Doug read the author's brief bio on the back cover. After retiring from the Army, General Jack McLeod began teaching history at Central Texas State University. This is his first novel. Not much of a biography, huh? Doug asked. He has a Wikipedia article. You should read it, said Tyler. Doug reached into the breast pocket of his suit, pulled out his iPhone, and started tapping away. He read for a few seconds and his eyebrows went up. Doug grinned. This guy is the real deal, isn't he? Tyler only nodded his head. Jack and Kathy McLeod's house, Round Rock, Texas. Jack McLeod, a retired U.S. Air Force brigadier general, was excited and couldn't wait to break the news to his wife. If you didn't know him well, you might not have been able to pick up on his excitement. However, if you knew him well, you guessed it from the half smile that turned into a half smile for a split second. Throughout his military career, McLeod had always been able to keep his emotions under control, and to him, That brief smirk was the equivalent of unbridled glee. A television series, he thought to himself. They really want to turn my book into a television series. And not just anyone, but Tyler Sherman. It was impossible to pick up a newspaper or magazine, print or online, and not read about Sherman's mega success as a prolific television producer. Jack didn't watch a lot of television, but he did watch The Captain. Sure, it was a bit of a soap opera, but exciting nonetheless. And that's who was going to turn his book into a TV show. Because of a call from Alex Cordell, his agent and attorney, McLeod canceled classes for the day. An unheard-of event that left the history department faculty at Central Texas State University, another Austin university, speculating about what might have happened. Was it military-related? Was it a personal matter? Why did the general cancel his morning classes? The professors were curious, and the students were just glad for the suddenly free hour. Meanwhile, Jack hurried home to share the happy news with his wife. The red Corvette in the driveway made Jack wince. The individual license plate that read Dabble gave him a sense of unease he hadn't felt since the last time he'd been in combat. Having to park on the street in front of his own house was even more annoying and forced Jack to do what he did best, confront the situation. He opened the front door and entered the house. Seeing no one in the living room, he stopped and turned around, listening to the sounds that soon came from the bedroom. The bedroom smelled like a brothel. His wife stared at him shocked when she finally noticed Jack standing in the doorway with a furious expression on his face. The piece of shit didn't even pause. He continued walking toward Kathy, smirking at Jack. Katie jumped to her knees and screamed, "Danny, stop it!" She had the presence of mind to be at least a little embarrassed. She got off the bed and started to put on her robe. Jack had seen her naked 1,000 times, and yet she was hiding her nakedness from her husband and not her lover. "Jack, I'm sorry you had to see this. I was hoping I could tell you about it better than I can now." Jack felt the anger building in him and began to contain his emotions. Otherwise, he would have been tempted to kill the smirking jerk who was slowly getting dressed next to his wife. He had the large build of a soccer lineman who hadn't been to the weight room in years. Fat on top of layers of muscle. And body hair. Lots of body hair. "Danny, wait for me in the car. I'll be there in a minute." "Are you sure, babe? I can wait for you right here." He continued to grin cheekily at Jack. Katie smiled at him. "I'll be fine. Jack won't cause any trouble. What about you?" Kathy looked at Jack. Jack looked at his wife in disgust. "Yeah, don't worry about that. I wouldn't touch her. As far as I'm concerned, you can take her with you. I never want to see you two again." A hint of anger flashed across Katie's face. "Really, Jack? After 20 years of marriage, you show me that kind of respect?" Jack looked at Kathy with a neutral expression and ignored her idiotic question. "I'm not even going to ask why or for how long. I just want you out of this house. Pack your things and leave." Katie nodded. "That's our plan. I was hoping to let you know more gently. I'm leaving you for Danny. He's going to give me a much better life than the one I could have with you." Katie pulled a couple of suitcases out of her closet and began filling them with clothes. "I thought you had so much potential. I thought you'd be at the top of your game. I thought you'd get a third or fourth star. Then to Congress or the Senate, I was going to be somebody in Washington. And then you worked your way up to foreman, resigned, and got a job teaching school." Kathy shook her head in bewilderment. "How could you expect me to settle for something like that? I put up with the role of army wife for 20 years and this is my payment?" She waved her hand, pointing to the modest shack that had been their home until 5 minutes ago. "I need something better than this. I need something better than you." Katie continued stuffing clothes into her suitcase. "I'm not going to have this conversation with you. Just walk away. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce." Kathy sighed. "Great. You'll probably try to embarrass me or shame me. I realize that. But I'm leaving you for a much bigger and better opportunity. His name is Danny DeBull Bullard. He played in the NFL. He owns the biggest Chevy dealership in Texas. He's going to give me the kind of life you could never give me. It may not be as glamorous as being a senator's wife in Washington, but I can handle it. I don't expect you to be happy for me, but don't be such an angry boy. It doesn't suit you." Jack looked at her with the indifference with which he would look at prisoners of war in a theater of war. She was the enemy now. Turning his back on his ex-wife, he left the bedroom and headed for the bar. He poured himself a couple fingers of bourbon and exhaled slowly. Turning around, he noticed his wife's boyfriend sitting in Jack's chair. In his damn chair. "Get out of my house, you pathetic piece of shit!" Danny stood up and laughed without the slightest sign of mirth. "Hey, I get it. You're going to find out you're a cuckold. That should be a shock to the system." He chuckled again. "I'll leave when I'm ready, damn it, and not a minute sooner." Jack took 3 quick steps and found himself in front of Danny. Danny's eyes widened with fear. What he saw on Jack McLeod's face attested to his own mortality. He raised his hands and quickly stepped back. Katie ran into the living room. Jack was calmly drinking bourbon and Danny stood with his back against the wall, his face pale and his heart pounding. "Damn it, Jack. Act like an adult, not a kid who's had his toy taken away." "I told him to get out. And now I'm telling you the same thing. Get out now." "We're leaving." "Danny, get my stuff." "Jack, this could have gone easily. But you want to do it the hard way." "Fine. We'll do it the hard way." Danny walked out of the bedroom, carrying Katie's suitcases and smirking at Jack, whose courage had returned to him when Katie interfered with his conversation. "Don't feel bad. The better man won." Jack looked at him. "Congratulations. You won the prize. And what a prize she is. A cheating wife." He shook his head in disgust. Danny looked first at Jack, then at Kathy, and his swagger became less noticeable than before. He walked out without another word. Katie looked at Jack, anger written all over her face. "You're going to pay for this, asshole. I'll pick up the rest of your stuff later." She slammed the front door behind her. Jack took a sip of bourbon and wondered how a day that had started on such a high note could have gone so horribly wrong. He sighed and reached for his cell phone. Time to call his daughter Kelsey and let her know that her parents were getting a divorce. Jonathan, Jack McLeod, had never been a typical Army officer. Both of Jack's parents died when he was in high school, and the last 2 years of his high school career were raised by his maternal grandfather, Lonnie Boudreau, a Cajun refinery worker who never met a law he didn't want to break. Normally, Lonnie was a good guy, but after one extra drink, he would go from zero to a son of a bitch. The problem was that you never knew exactly when he was going to have a drink. After graduating from high school and knowing he wasn't ready for college, Jack enlisted in the Army the day he turned 18. Jack enlisted in the Army as an E1 private with military specialty. 11B, infantry rifleman, also known in military parlance as target, pop-up, non-electrical. Based on his test scores and success in basic training, he was approved for jump school and then ranger school. By the time he received orders for permanent assignment to Fort Bragg, he had been promoted to the rank of Private First Class, E3, and his uniform featured jump wings and the Ranger emblem. Shortly after arriving at Fort Bragg, he enrolled as a part-time student at Fayetteville State University. Among the students enrolled in the undergraduate and graduate programs at FSU were many officers and enlisted men. The university was equipped for both full-time and part-time study, so Jack could attend classes while on base or part-time when he was temporarily transferred to another duty station or changed duty stations. By the end of July 1990, Jack was getting into a familiar rut of training and studying. And on August 2, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. During Operation Desert Storm, Jack was deployed to Kuwait and then to Iraq, where that brief skirmish took place. He shook his head, remembering some of the decisions made by his superiors. It was there that he received his first Bronze Star and his first Purple Heart. The Bronze Star for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the Purple Heart for being awarded a Purple Heart. The incident was so minor that Jack never talked about it and was almost embarrassed to wear the award. Getting shot in the ass by a terrified 12-year-old was no reason to brag. A week after receiving his awards, he was sent back to Fort Benning. Standing on the tarmac waiting to board the C-130 airplane that was taking him back to Benning, he looked around the airport and figured it wouldn't be the last time he played in that sandbox. Through classes, correspondence courses, and CLEP tests, Jack was able to earn his bachelor's degree in history in 6 years, 2 years longer than normal. By this time, Jack was a sergeant, E5, and decided that while he liked the Army, he found greater fulfillment in being an officer. Jack applied to Officer Candidate School, and after passing a panel of 3, was accepted into OCS. For Jack, OCS was an easy step. As a junior non-commissioned officer, he was well-versed in military protocol and procedures. The senior NCOs in his unit remarked on his calm, collected demeanor and natural leadership qualities. They all felt that when the going got tough or the situation reached a stalemate, Jack McLeod was exactly the kind of soldier they wanted by their side. After completing the 12-week course at Fort Benning, Jack was promoted to the rank of second lieutenant, and his gold bars were pinned on him by his instructor since he had no wife or family. After receiving his rank, Jack was ordered to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, for his first assignment as a platoon leader in the 82nd Airborne Brigade. Jack had already been in the Army for 8 years and had attained the rank of first lieutenant when he met Kathy Bascom. Kathy was working as a bartender at an Irish pub in Fayetteville when Jack walked in there with several platoon leaders assigned to the 82nd Brigade. The Lion's Den pub wasn't particularly popular with Fort Bragg soldiers, but that's what attracted Jack to it. With its Celtic music and selection of food, Jack and his friends were sure they could spend a relaxing evening here. All three were immediately charmed by the beautiful brunette who was their waitress. The possessor of the classic beauty often seen on the covers of fashion magazines was 6 feet tall and weighed 130 pounds, her brunette hair gathered in a ponytail. The three junior officers had their tongues untied in amazement. Katie, for her part, was ready to tear the trio apart until she looked into the gray eyes of the tallest of them. Slender, with a bob hairstyle, and eyes that seemed to stare into the very depths of her soul. For the first time in all the time she'd spent with another man, Katie clicked her tongue. And this one was a lieutenant, for crying out loud. She'd dated majors, colonels, and even a general. But this lieutenant had left her completely confused. They made a date for the next night and were soon together when they weren't working. Jack had a successful military career. He earned a master's degree in American history and began work on his doctoral dissertation. He wasn't sure what he would do with his doctorate, but he enjoyed academia and thought he might go into teaching after retirement. On September 11, 2001, Jack was a Major, 04, and commanded a company in the 82nd Regiment. A few hours later, they found out they were being mobilized. A few weeks later, Jack's company was on patrol in the mountains of Afghanistan. It was a war unlike anything military leaders had ever faced. Everyone could be considered an enemy, or a friend, or both. It was not for nothing that the decades-long rivalry between Britain and Russia in Afghanistan was called the Great Game. It was for his actions while patrolling the Unai Pass in Maidan Wardak province that Jack was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. In fact, Jack was recommended for the Medal of Honor. Senior leaders did not want to hand out too many medals at the beginning of the conflict. One of the lessons learned during Desert Storm was that if too many people received medals of honor, the medals would become useless. The few who did deserve the Medal of Honor were demoted to the DSC or Silver Star in the early days of the Afghan conflict. Bravery is often about taking a calm look at a situation and thinking, "Today is a good day to die." His platoon was pinned down by an enfilade, that is, a line of fire along the entire length of the platoon column. Since Jack was at the head of the column and the fire from the enfilade was coming from away from the head, he did the only thing he could think of. He attacked the enfilade. Running the entire length of the attacking group, Jack was able to kill 6 Afghan fighters and severely wound 4 others. This broke the will of the remaining Afghans and they scattered. A New York Times reporter watched the whole thing, and for a short time Jack became famous. He despised the situation, and Kathy loved it. In her weekly letters, she attached links to news stories about him. Links he didn't read or acknowledge in any way. Soon, Jack's time in the sun was over. Back in the States, the first thing Jack did was ask Kathy to marry him. She agreed, and they were quietly married in the post chapel under the direction of the battalion chaplain. Jack served 2 tours of duty in Iraq. During his first deployment, he was awarded the Silver Star for bravery. During his second deployment, he was awarded a second Bronze Star. He also received his second Purple Heart for wounds sustained in a firefight with the Republican Guard. After returning to the world, or the land of the big PX, as the old-timers called it, Jack's life went on as usual. He continued to work on his doctoral dissertation, and he and Katie kept busy with their family. Their daughter Kelsey was born 9 months later, almost the day after Jack returned from his first deployment to Iraq. Katie loved her daughter, but wished she had more of her features. She had her father's blonde hair and gray eyes. People said she had her mother's nose, but what did that even mean? Everyone has a nose. By the age of 43, Jack had 25 years of service and was a lieutenant colonel in command of a battalion. He had a doctoral dissertation entitled Texas Statehood as a reflection of the success of the Bonham McLeod Garcia law firm. His dissertation was a study of how a particular law firm influenced the fortunes of Texas and vice versa. Jack was distantly related to the law firm's founders and, during his 3-year tour of duty at Fort Hood, Texas, had gained unlimited access to the vast amount of historical documents the law firm kept. Jack was already considering retirement when he was informed that he was on the list for promotion to colonel. Being placed on the list was not unusual in itself, but Jack was informed that his name was at the top of the list. That was unexpected. A Black Channel source had told him that his name on the promotion list was a tacit admission that his DCP should have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Jack decided not to resign, and after his promotion, he was offered a teaching position at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. His time at West Point proved to Jack that he loved teaching. He thrived in an academic environment and loved interacting with students. Katie enjoyed her time at West Point because she interacted with many famous politicians and members of the media there. Although West Point is primarily a college, many famous and well-known people inherently pass through its halls. Katie has met politicians, foreign dignitaries, and the President of the United States. She ate it all with a spoon. After 3 years at West Point, Jack's name was placed on a list for the rank of Brigadier General. He was promoted and ordered to lead a brigade at Fort Benning. Jack was well aware that the U.S. Army was the most politicized organization in the United States, if not the world. The reciprocity, backstabbing, and general conniving at the general officer level was embarrassing, and Jack quickly grew tired of it. He decided to retire and do something else with his life. After completing his dissertation, he had the germs of an idea to turn it into a novel. His service at West Point gave him the time to do so, and so his first novel came about. At this time, the novel The Lawyers was completed. It was accepted by a small publishing house in Austin. The novel would never become a bestseller, but it became a calling card that every university wanted to have, a published author in the state. The University of Central Texas happily hired a retired U.S. Army general with a Ph.D. and a published novel. Kathy was beyond furious. The move to Texas, the loss of prestige, loss of the future she envisioned in Washington, and so the seeds had been sown. "You've got to be kidding me, right?" Kelsey exclaimed. "Your mom cheated on you? In your own bed?" Jack heard the heartache in his daughter's voice. "Are you going to get a divorce? Will you be able to forgive her?" Jack sighed. "She wants a divorce as badly as I do. She's moving to Dallas and settling in with her boyfriend. I'll serve her with the papers in the next few days." "I know Mom can be a real bitch sometimes, but I didn't expect her to be so cruel. You know I'm here for you, Dad. I'm on Team McLeod. She could be Team Bascom, Team Bullard, or anyone else, but I'm on your side. Always and forever." "I know, baby, and I'm so happy and proud to have you as my daughter. I don't expect you to cut your mother out of your life. After all, she is your mother. I'm not going to try to distance you from each other. She was a good mother, but she was never a great mother. She was always selfish and self-centered. I can't believe she's with that used car salesman. I've seen his commercials. He's disgusting. Fat slob who used to play soccer and now sells cars. What the hell is she thinking, Dad?" "I don't know, Kels, but she's his problem now." Jack talked to his daughter for a few more minutes, mostly about how things were going at school. Kelsey was a freshman at West Point. She had decided to follow in her father's footsteps and become an Army officer. This decision made Katie even more angry. Now, not only would she be living in Texas, but her daughter would be moving to the other side of the country for college. Jack's life went on as most people's lives do, if they are lucky. Jack filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and Kathy countersued on the grounds of mental cruelty and abuse. Kathy was forced to admit that there was no evidence of mental cruelty and abuse. She argued that Jack had no evidence of adultery. Jack produced a sealed plastic bag containing linens from the day he caught her with a used car salesman. Although there was no fault in the state, proof of adultery affected alimony. She was not subject to alimony. Kathy claimed half of Jack's Army pension. Although Jack served in the Army for 30 years, he was married to Kathy for only 20 of those years. This entitled Kathy to one-third of his pension at the discretion of the judge. Because of the evidence of adultery, that share was reduced to 10%. This infuriated Kathy even more. Soon the divorce was finalized and Kathy completely disappeared from Jack's life. Kelsey refused any contact with her mother. She blocked her mother on all social media, email, and phone. She didn't bother to respond to her mother's invitation to the wedding. This made Katie even more angry with Jack. But the thing that would upset Katie the most was the fact that she almost went crazy with anger and jealousy, a train that hadn't even pulled away from the station yet. Straight Flush Ranch, 125 miles west of Austin, Texas. It's an honor to meet you, General McLeod. Tyler Sherman extended his hand in greeting to his guests. General McLeod was accompanied by his attorney and agent Alex Cordell. Alex headed the entertainment law department of Bonham, McLeod, Garcia, LLP, better known as B. McG. Please call me Jack. I was looking forward to meeting you too. Jack shook Tyler's hand and they quickly sized each other up. They were both tall and slender, with a rough-hewn appearance that, while not conventionally beautiful, still made women turn their heads and look at them. Both were Texans, but both had experience living in other parts of the country. Tyler had dark hair with flecks of gray and wore designer stubble. After the divorce, Jack McLeod changed. Gone were the haircut and clean shave he had worn for nearly 40 years. Instead, he let his blonde hair grow so that it now reached his collar. An author had once described them as long, like a country-style singer, and that was the most accurate description he could come up with. There was a bit of gray mixed in with the blonde hair, but it was worth paying attention to. He had also grown a mustache that was dark blonde without the slightest sign of gray. He looked at least 10 years younger than his real age of 52. In his Army career, he had seen so many soldiers who looked older than their years that he was genuinely shocked that by growing his hair and mustache, he had lost years. Can I get you guys something to drink? Tyler waved his hand toward a bar cart that stood in the corner of his office. After the guest declined, he invited them to sit in the chairs in his office. The office was actually a ranch barn. It was 50 yards from the main ranch house and had been custom built so that Thayer could use it as an office while working on his Texas ranch. It was luxuriously furnished and could have been designed by Ralph Lauren. A Neiman Marcus-style ranch, that was the motive, and it worked perfectly. All three sat down at the table and Tyler began the discussion. You've had suggestions for a week now. What are your thoughts? Alex answered for Jack. Let's discuss the matter with Bonham, McLeod, and Garcia. We agree in principle with the proposal, but with one change. I'm guessing, of course, Tyler said dryly, but nevertheless, why don't you tell me about it? We retain the rights to the merchandise, Alex said. I told the buyers at Ascendant that the dog wouldn't hunt when they added that to the contract. I'm sure retaining the rights to the B. McG merchandise is not a deal breaker. Other than that, are we good? Absolutely. Now let's talk about Jack. $250,000 for the TV rights is too little, even with the EP credit. How many seasons do you plan to show, and why aren't you planning on using Jack as a writer? $250,000 for television rights for an aspiring writer with very little recognition is quite normal. An executive producer credit would make a huge profit for an overseas syndicate. Everything we produce is bought up by overseas markets. Jack, your share as executive producer will be over $1 million per season, and we think there's enough material in your book for 4 seasons. As for writing the scripts, Tyle shook his head. I write all the scripts. I'll let you read them and listen to your suggestions, but I have the final say on each script. Period. End of story. Alex looked at Jack and shrugged. It's up to you, but it's a good deal for you. I want to make a couple small changes, but overall, I think you should take it. Tyler said, There's one small detail I'd like to bring up. Have you heard about the casting call yet? Alex had definitely heard about the casting announcement. It was all over the news. The casting of Mark Tibbs would be a big enough event, but the casting of Maria Elena Montoya caused an earthquake like tremors in Hollywood. It was the biggest acquisition of the last decade. Jack nodded. Mark Tibbs for the role of James Bonham and Maria Elena Montoya for the role of Angelica Bonham, Robert's wife. Who will you choose for the role of Robert Bonham? Tyler turned his head to the right and then to the left as if to release his inner tension. I have one man for the part. He's not a professional actor. What's more, I don't know if he's had any acting experience, but he has looks, charisma, and presence, and I think he'll be a natural. He paused and leaned back in his chair. Okay, Alex said. Now that you have our best interests at heart, who is it? In response, Tyler held out a piece of paper to Alex and Jack. Alex lowered his gaze and his eyes widened as he immediately realized what Tyler was getting at. Jack, on the other hand, looked puzzled. It's my Wikipedia entry. A second passed, but then it finally got to Jack. No, not just no, but hell no. Jack, you're perfect for this role. You have the looks and the charisma. I know you're not an actor, but if I could make a soccer player into a respectable actor, I know we can do it with you. Well, for one thing, I'm too old to start acting. I'd look ridiculous. Let me object to that, Tyler said. Have you ever seen the John Wayne movie True Grit? Seeing that Jack nodded, Tyler continued. When John Wayne was in that movie, he was the same age as Tom Cruise was when he finished filming the last Mission Impossible movie. And you're almost a decade younger than Tom Cruise. I'll give you another name. Odie Murphy, the most decorated soldier of World War II. He was awarded every medal for bravery from every Allied country in that war. He became an actor, wrote an autobiography, and made a movie playing himself. It's going to be okay, Jack. If a Texas guy like Odie Murphy can act, I know you can too. But, Jack looked around, trying to parry Tyler's argument. He was stuck searching for an answer. Finally, he looked at Alex, who was trying to hold back a laugh. The Gables on the creek, Turtle Creek, Dallas, Texas. Mrs. Bullard, I'm so glad you could join me. Kathy couldn't believe her luck. She had only been married to Jack for 3 months, and it had already happened. When she received a call from Carolyn Collier suggesting they meet for lunch, she thought there had been some kind of mistake. Carolyn Collier was a Dallas socialite and married to the owner of Collier Petroleum. Carolyn told Kathy that the meeting would be about the annual Beef and Butter Gala. Kathy knew that the BOG was the most exclusive annual event held in Dallas. It was the Texas version of the New York Met Gala. All the famous people, politicians, and celebrities with Texas roots went there. Please call me Kathy, she said, exchanging an air kiss with Carolyn. And I'm Carolyn, she smiled. That was only partially true. Her closest friends called her Carrie. It seemed to her that Kathy Bullard would never be so honored, but who knew? The ladies sat down at a table and were soon approached by a server who took their drink order. Taking a cue from Carolyn, Kathy ordered a Chardonnay as well. We were surprised when we found out that Danny Bullard had gotten married. Everyone thought he was a hardened bachelor. No one even knew he was dating anyone. We dated for a few months. We decided to keep our relationship a secret. I'm a pretty private person and don't like to spread about my personal affairs. Carolyn gave Kathy an appraising look. She only partially believed her story. She was reminded of Julius Caesar's phrase that Cassius had lean and hungry eyes. Carolyn was sure there was more to the story, but decided not to pursue it further. A wife's background wasn't always the deciding factor. She knew an African-American Supreme Court justice who met his Caucasian wife on a racial gambling prostitution site. As long as the wife could hide her past, who cared? It's amazing, Carolyn says. To change the subject, I'd like to meet you. Are you familiar with the Beef and Butter Gala? Bog? Yes, of course, it's famous. Everyone who goes to the Beef and Butter Gala. Well, that's true, but it's actually a charity fundraiser. Every year we raise about $10 million for charity through the Bog. I've been the chairperson for the last 10 years, and my co-chairperson for the last 5 years has been Lorena Garcia Marquez. This year, Lorena wants to take a step back to spend time with her husband and their new baby. You had a Mexican girl as co-chair? Katie asked, surprised. Maybe the Bog isn't as big a deal as she thought. Carolyn looked at Katie with narrowed eyes. Lorena Garcia Marquez is royalty from Texas. Her great-great-great-grandfather died at the Battle of San Jacinto, fighting for Texas independence against Mexico. Her great-great-grandfather was one of the founders of the oldest and most respected law firm in Texas, if not the entire United States. She, like her husband, is a partner in the very same law firm of Bonham McLeod, Garcia. She's not some Mexican girl. Hearing this, Kathy turned pale and realized she had made a rash move. Did Carolyn know that she had once been married to McLeod and that he had written a book about the law firm? She had heard rumors of a television series based on that book. Katie looked around the restaurant. Had she really been set up? I apologize. It turned out much worse than I thought it would. She's an amazing person and I'd like to meet her someday. Carolyn cast an oblique glance at Kathy, but decided to give her credit. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she was racist. Maybe she was a nervous racist. If so, that put her on par with half the wives in Dallas. Either way, we're looking for someone to bring new blood and sponsorship to the Beef and Butter Gala. This year's gala was held last month, but we're starting work on the next gala right after that. Now let's cut to the chase, Katie thought. What her ex-husband would call killing rats. She wasn't being set up, she was being turned on. Co-chair of the board of directors if she could make a big enough donation. How much are you counting on? Kathy asked. Carolyn was counting on a $250,000 sponsorship. After talking with Kathy Bullard, Carolyn revised that figure upward. $300,000, she said. Kathy sighed upon hearing that figure. It was a huge amount of money. There was no way she could agree to that amount of money without discussing it with Danny first. I'll have to discuss it with my husband, Kathy replied. Of course you will discuss it, my dear. Think about it and let me know. But don't forget the doors it will open for you. You're new to Dallas society. Making acquaintances with the right people can be difficult. This will prepare you well. Now let's have some tuna niçoise, shall we? Carolyn knew how to find an approach to people who were rising in the community. Executive offices, Phoenix Financial, Austin, Texas. The office of Michael Sullivan, CEO. Hi, Danny. Good to see you again. Michael Sullivan ushered Danny Bullard into his office and made his way to the chair in front of his desk. Some dealers he sat in chairs in the corner of the office and some he sat in front of his desk as a power play. He didn't like Danny Bullard and wanted this meeting to end as soon as possible. He had only agreed to meet with Danny because he had traveled all the way from Dallas to Austin without an appointment. Michael had seen fit to spare him a few minutes. After the pleasantries were exhausted, Michael asked Danny what he could do for him. Our dealership contract is up for renewal in 6 months, Danny said. I'd like to talk to you about an early contract extension. As CEO of Phoenix Financial, Michael was not usually involved in dealer negotiations. For that, he hired sales staff. If a dealership was large enough to sell enough Phoenix Financial F&I products, they often requested that Michael be personally involved in the process. Other dealerships had such a long history with Phoenix that Michael wanted to be involved in the process to preserve the relationship with the dealership. Danny Bullard was neither. He was a former soccer player and was arrogant enough to consider that a reason for the CEO to intervene. We can talk about this, Michael began. He tapped a few keys on his computer. To date, sales of financial and insurance products are down 10%, but the loss ratio is up 20%. Tell me about it. Danny's face flushed for a moment when Sullivan asked a question about his business. He had always thought Michael Sullivan was a bore as thick as a pencil. The kind of nerd who sits behind a desk and dotted and crossed eyes and crosses over eyes all day long without having the slightest clue about the real world. He looked down on Sullivan and thought he was a big asshole. If Danny had ever bothered to look around Michael's office, he would have noticed the Golden Gloves trophies and pictures of Michael from the Army. He might even have noticed the Ranger insignia on Michael's uniform, but probably not. As for the downturn in business, we are in a down cycle. At most Dallas dealerships, car sales are either down or flat. It goes like this. Business goes up, business goes down. In a few months, we'll be up. As for the loss ratio, it has gone up a lot. We lost a service manager a few months ago. I have to manage the service department and the dealership. It's knocking me out, but I've scheduled some interviews for the service manager position and hope to fill it soon. It will help with the unprofitability. Danny knew this problem would arise. A dealer's loss ratio is the percentage of sales under extended warranties to the amount of claims under those warranties. If it was a legitimate breakdown, a claim should have been made. The problem started when the service department started inflating those claims. The car needs 1 pull rod, but you tell the warranty company it needs 2. The gasket is barely leaking a tiny amount of oil. but you claim it's a leak and you can see the drips. Suddenly, a $200 claim turns into $1,200. That's good for the dealership, but not so good for the extended warranty company, especially when you consider that the dealership has the right to cancel the claim. Ah, contract termination. As an incentive to sell its F&I products, extended warranty, gap coverage, appearance protection plans, hazardous road tire warranty, Phoenix Financial provided an interest-free loan to the director, owner, of the dealership. This loan was repaid through sales of F&I products. This is why the sales and F&I managers were so insistent on promoting these products. They had no idea what the owner's incentives were, but they knew they needed to sell F&I products to keep their jobs. Phoenix Financial provided Danny with a $5 million loan when he signed the dealer agreement. That agreement was expiring in 6 months, and Danny wanted another agreement with Phoenix, and a loan. Given declining sales and rising losses, we can extend the dealer overdraft to $2 million, but I'm not sure I'd be comfortable extending it for a larger amount. Danny didn't like that answer. Even though sales are down, we're still the largest GM dealer by sales volume in the entire Southwest. I was thinking of a $10 million markup. Michael shook his head. That's not going to happen. I can agree to 3, but we'll have to include certain safeguards and precautions in the contract. Danny wasn't happy, but he had no choice. He needed money right away, and Phoenix Financial was his best chance. He could have looked for a new finance company, but that process would have taken months, and he needed the money now. Damn beef and butter, Straight Flush Ranch, 125 miles west of Austin, Texas. The set of the TV show The Lawyers. You settling in okay, Jack? Tyler Sherman asked. Have you met any other talent yet? Jack McLeod shook his head. What the hell am I doing here, Tyler? 6 years ago, I taught history at West Point. A year ago, I taught history at KTSU. And now, I have to convince people I'm an actor? Jack shook his head. You must be completely desperate if I'm the best you can do. Tyler laughed. Don't forget, I not only saw your audition, I attended it. You're a born actor. I've seen that in military leaders. To be a leader is to play the role of a leader. If you are good at it, your soldiers follow you and believe in you. If you are bad at playing that role, they don't trust you and they don't follow you. Like I said, you're a natural. Tyler waved his hand and went off to do what showrunners do. Jack leaned back in his chair, which, like the movie, had his name printed on the back, and immersed himself in thought. He had gotten to know all the actors when he read the script and was immediately struck by the professionalism of the cast. This was not the spoiled group of actors you read about in Hollywood gossip. Everyone showed up on time, ready to work and with memorized lines. Mark Tibbs easily switched from his natural British accent to a Southern accent for the role of James Bonham. Jack has lost his Texas accent over the years and has spent enough time in the South that his accent is unmistakable. But what surprised him the most was Maria Elena Montoya, before whom he bowed. Everyone knew her tragic story, and everyone was attentive to her feelings. She hadn't filmed in 3 years, but watching her on set, you would never know it. She was the first to arrive on set and the last to leave. She was always willing to lend a helping hand to anyone who needed it. It didn't matter if it was a gaffer or caterer. Maria Elena was always ready to help. When Jack first met her at the reading table, she smiled at Jack and told him she enjoyed reading his novel. Jack's first thought was, yes, of course you read it. But her next words stunned him. To really understand Angelica, I wanted to try to get inside her head. I couldn't do that just by reading your novel. I had my agent request a copy of your dissertation, and I read it. It helped me better understand who Angelica was as a person. Maria Elena Montoya was not just a smarmy face who could repeat lines written for her by someone else, a talent that many actors of both sexes believe makes them special. Nor was she a smarmy face on long legs who could walk the runway during a fashion show. Nor was she just the niece of the King of Spain and the widow of a Formula One driver. Maria Elena Montoya was a complex, intelligent woman whose stunning looks hid an almost genius IQ. She loved to talk about Parisian fashion or quantum computing. She was well-read and spoke well on a wide variety of topics. Jack was awed by the 35-year-old actress and realized he needed to stay as far away from her as possible. He could easily make a fool of himself, and he didn't want to let that happen. The first scene Jack shot with Maria was a scene from episode 4. Tyler originally thought of casting a younger actor to play the role of a young Robert Bonham. When Jack showed up at Tyler's ranch with a mustache and outgrown hair, Tyler realized that with a little makeup and special effects, it would be easy to age Jack, allowing him to play Robert for decades. Not only would it save money, but it would also provide a more believable continuity over time, and Jack was up to the task. In a scene they filmed today, Robert Bonham pushes Angelica away. His wife died in childbirth 6 months ago, and Robert felt he needed to grieve some more. Angelica had been in love with Robert since she was a teenager and longed for him. Robert stubbornly insisted that they weren't together. Angelica threw caution aside and rushed to Robert. Scene: the interior of the Bonham law firm office during daylight hours. Angelica. Mi querido, you can't grieve forever. I am here. I love you. I long for your touch. Don't push me away. Angelica walks over to Robert. She holds out her hands. As she slowly approaches Robert, his expression becomes conflicted. He mourns for his wife, but she is dead. Angelica is beautiful, vibrant, and desires him. Robert closes his eyes and a calmness descends on him. His face seems to relax and a smile appears on his lips. He opens his arms and Angelica throws herself into his embrace. They kiss passionately. End scene. The English have a word that is unique to them. It's a word that is difficult to translate into American English. The word thunderstruck is close to it, but it is still missing. The British word is gobsmacked. Maria Elena's kiss stunned Jack. It wasn't good, not good at all. He had to find Tyler. It was time to reevaluate his role. Bullard Chevrolet, Service Department. Danny Bullard was furious. Of the 4 interviews he'd scheduled for the new service manager, he'd canceled 3 of them. 2 of them didn't even bother to call, they just didn't show up. He'd been managing the service department as well as the sales department for almost 6 months now, and the stress was getting to him. He was yelling at both employees and customers. His wife was taking the brunt of his anger. Last night he was so angry that he pushed Kathy through the closet door in the bedroom. For a moment he saw the terror in her eyes that he might come after her and hurt her. Damn it, he just needed to find a good service manager. Danny tensed up and got angry when the speakerphone said he was needed at the service center. Damn. The service center customer was a hottie, blonde with a ponytail, wearing black yoga pants, Nike cross trainers, and a pink t-shirt that said AOC for president. Jesus, thought Danny. Goddamn Barbie soccer mom. A few feet away from him stood a Barbie clone playing on a cell phone. He couldn't tell if the clone was his daughter or his sister. They both looked alike. Danny smiled as he approached the customer. Hi, I'm Danny Bullard. I'm the owner. Do you have a problem you'd like to talk to someone about? Yes. I'm Marcy Clarendon. I left my Suburban a week ago because the air conditioner stopped working. Your service advisor charged me $150 to diagnose the problem and told me the compressor was faulty. She also said I needed to replace— Marcy paused, checking the bill— the battery and the orifice. She quoted the amount as $1,500, including diagnostics. Marcy paused, and that gave Danny a chance to cast a glance at Debbie, who was his only female counselor. She studiously avoided his gaze. Barbie's clone continued to play on his cell phone while Barbie caught her breath. I agreed to the repairs, and 2 days later she called me to tell me my Suburban was ready. I paid for the repairs, and when I went out to the car and started it up, the air conditioning wasn't working. I went back and talked to your consultant. This time the customer actually pointed to Debbie. Your counselor said I would have to keep my Suburban, but I could borrow it. I hadn't heard from her all day, so I called after lunch and asked what was going on with my car. She said the evaporator was leaking and it would cost me another $1,500 to repair it. The customer swung for an estimate. That's unacceptable. I want to know what you're going to do about it. Danny tried to put a sympathetic expression on his face. It's unfortunate. I'm sure you realize that it's not always possible to identify all problems the first time. Sometimes you have to fix the most serious problems first and then other problems pop up. Marcy wasn't satisfied with that. I paid $150 to diagnose the reason my air conditioner is not working. If I pay you to diagnose a problem, I expect you to diagnose it. If your people had done their job right, we wouldn't be here. Danny tried to calm her down. A hysterical woman was just what he needed to end this shitty day. Okay, calm down and think about this rationally. The price would have been the same if we had diagnosed it right away or the way it ended up happening. You would still have had to pay the same amount. Being told to take it easy was exactly what she needed to hear in order to take action. I was willing to pay $1,500 for the air conditioner. Neither then nor now am I willing to pay $3,000 for air conditioning in an 8-year-old Suburban. I want my old parts installed and my money back. Danny looked at Debbie, who muttered the word missing. Danny turned to Marcy and said, "That can't be right. Your parts have been sent for recycling. Look, I'm willing to waive the $150 diagnostic fee if you replace the evaporator. That should help a little." By this point, Danny's head was splitting with a headache, and he just wanted this day to be over as soon as possible. "This is unacceptable. I want a refund. I want my truck returned to the condition it was in when I brought it in for service. If you can't do that, then I want to talk to your boss." Danny exhaled noisily. He'd had enough. He was sick of playing service manager, and his head hurt so bad he was afraid he was going to have a stroke. "When I said I own this dealership, what do you think it means that I have someone I report to? You think Charlie Chevrolet signs my paycheck? I'm the goddamn owner, dumbass. I have the final say, and what I say gets done. Pay for the vaporizer or don't pay for the vaporizer. I don't care one way or the other. The air conditioning in my car works fine. I don't care if you sweat or not. But if you want to come back after work, we'll try to work something out." Danny turned on his heel and walked out of the service department. He didn't see Barbie's clone smile, tap the screen of his phone, and give Barbie a thumbs up. Straight Flush Ranch, 125 miles west of Austin, Texas. The set of the TV show The Lawyers. Tyler threw a party to celebrate the end of filming. Buckman's BBQ restaurant out of Fredericksburg provided the party, and you couldn't walk 10 feet without ending up at a full beer tub. In addition, 2 bar tents had every conceivable alcoholic beverage on display, ready to be dispensed as part of Tyler's open bar. 3 bands were scheduled to perform at the party. The party started after the last stage ended at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and will continue through tomorrow morning. Tyler provided a fleet of buses to take the cast back to their hotels or Airbnbs. Tyler felt that lodging was a necessity, and Ascendant would pay for it. Jack had never been much of a drinker, but for the past hour he had been drinking the same beer. There were hay bales around the stage, stacked so that you could sit on one bale and lean on another. Jack was sitting with his eyes closed, facing the sun, listening to the music when Maria Elena sat down next to him. He realized it was Maria Elena before he even opened his eyes. Only a light scent of sandalwood emanated from her. "You have been avoiding me for weeks now, my general." She said the word general in a Spanish accent. Jack sighed. After his on-screen kiss with Maria, Jack had practically begged Tyler to cancel his contract with him. Tyler had laughed at him. "Every time you move, that girl's eyes follow you," he said. "I know you're attracted to her. I think she cares about you too. I don't know what she sees in an old, broken-down soldier, but damn, you're a lucky son of a bitch." "So hell no, I'm not letting you out of your contract. This girl has had a rough time the last few years. She's come out of her shell, and it's partly your fault. Take her with you to the malt shop, or the hop, or wherever else you old farts go. You both deserve to be happy." Jack was unwavering in his desire to stay away from Maria Elena. She was 17 years younger than him. Her uncle was the king of Spain. She was world famous and considered one of the most beautiful women in the world. What could he offer her? A 3-bedroom house in Round Rock, Texas? He opened his eyes and turned to face Maria. She was wearing cowboy boots, jeans, and a cowboy hat. She was also wearing a brown t-shirt with a U.S. Army emblem over a heart. Good God, Jack thought. She's the most beautiful creature that ever lived. "You're right, Maria. I have been avoiding you. When I'm around you, I lose all sense of who I am and what I'm doing. I don't like losing control like that. It scares me. You scare me." Maria smiled at Jack. "You're not going to war again, sweet general. And once we've been married for a few years, maybe you'll stop losing control." Jack shook his head. "I have a 3-bedroom house in Round Rock, Texas. I'm a college history professor who's temporarily fulfilling his fantasy and starring in a TV show. When it's over, I'll go back to teaching." He shook his head. Maria, I'm not what you're looking for. Jack, I'm 35 years old. I'm a widow who lost a child while he was still in my womb. Millions of people have witnessed my husband's death. It has been televised and replayed over and over again. I have experienced his death 1,000 times. Do you know what else I have experienced over and over again? Maria looked intently at Jack, who shook his head negatively. I'm reliving a conversation I had with him the night before he died. The conversation in which I told him I would no longer pay attention to his adventures. I told him I would divorce him after the race. Tears streamed down Mariah's face as she poured her heart out to Jack. He was distraught. He should have quit and not raced, but his stupid macho pride wouldn't let him. And it killed him. I killed him. That's why I hid for 3 years. I killed my husband. I killed my child. And I lost 3 years of my life mourning something that was not my fault, and over which I had no control. Jack, you're the first person I wanted to be with after my husband died. You, Jack, no one else. I love you. I ache for you. Don't reject me. Jack smiled at Maria. That sounds like a line from some cheesy TV show. Maria smiled back. It is, my future husband. Bullard Chevrolet, Dallas, Texas, the owner's office. Hello, Mr. Bullard. This is Cammie Carson. I'm the producer of the program Deadline America. Are you familiar with our show? Danny's first thought was that someone was messing with him. Of course, he was familiar with Deadline America. It was the most watched news show on television. I know your show. What can I do for you, Miss Carson? We're going to do a whole series of articles about departed athletes who have successfully transitioned into the business world. We hear too many stories about athletes going broke within a few years of leaving professional sports, and we thought a series like this would be a good counterpoint to that. Is this something you might be interested in? We'll interview you and your wife in your home and at your dealership. Yes, he was interested. And Kathy would be over the moon. Bullard House, Dallas, Texas. Danny and Kathy sat on the couch in front of the 90-inch TV, eagerly awaiting the start of Deadline America. The producers had told them that the entire episode would be about Danny and Kathy. The episode was heavily advertised on television and social media, and they were almost dreading the start of the show. The producers refused to show them the final edit, so this is the first time they will see it with the rest of the America Line audience. The first part of the episode covers Danny's soccer career from high school, through college, to the NFL and his time as a quarterback for the Chicago Bears. The episode talks about how Danny Bullard became Danny DeBull Danny in Chicago. Danny Bullard is known for his fierce, aggressive play on the field and wild, unpredictable life off the field. Some of his most famous games are recounted, his Pro Bowl appearances, and his only Super Bowl appearance with the Bears, in which they lost to the Colts. The storyline then switched to his move to the Dallas Cowboys and the problems he faced after the trade. The show talked about how Dallas cheated by taking a player who was no longer in his prime, and Danny didn't like it. There were several interviews with players and coaches, but none of them had anything good to say about Danny. Most of them were unfriendly and some were even rude. The show quickly turned to the topic of Danny buying a Chevrolet dealership and living in Dallas after soccer was over. Katie was shocked when the interview moved on to some of Danny's past romantic partners, and the fact that none of them agreed to appear in front of the camera or comment was telling. The next segment focused on Katie Bullard. When asked about her past, she tap-danced away and gave vague answers. Instead, she wanted to focus on her charity work and her upcoming job as co-chair of the Beef and Butter Gala. The next segment was an interview with Katie's daughter, Kelsey. Katie was shocked to the core when she saw that Kelsey was being interviewed. How did the producers know she had a daughter? How did they find her? Kelsey, dressed in her West Point cadet uniform, explained to the interviewer who her father was and how her mother cheated and then left her father for a used car salesman. The camera switched to a photo montage of Jack. There were pictures of Jack as he rose through the ranks in the U.S. Army. There were photos of Jack being awarded medals, and the host briefly listed the awards. The last Army photo showed Kathy pinning a general's star on Jack's collar. The next photo was of Jack's novel. This was followed by a photo montage from the set of The Advocates and a clip from the TV show showing Jack's role. Kathy thought Jack had a small role on the show. In fact, he was the star along with that Mexican girl. The last photo is an official Army photo of Jack in his officer's rank with the voiceover, Brigadier General retired. Jack McCloud refused to answer questions about his ex-wife, saying only, "I have nothing to say about that woman." The next interviewee was Carolyn Collier, chair of the Beef and Butter Gala. When asked about Kathy's role as co-chair of the BOG, Carolyn laughed. The Bullards made a very generous donation to the gala this year, but their partnership didn't end there. As far as I know, they're not even on the guest list. Kathy sat in shock. Danny was seething with rage, not only because of the $300,000 thrown away, which he now desperately needed, but because he guessed what was coming next. The interviewer walked with Danny through the service department, and Danny was telling him about the state-of-the-art equipment and how they were trying to provide top-notch customer service. The interviewer then asked Danny if he would comment on the video the producers had received. Assuming he had nothing to hide, Danny replied, "Absolutely." He was then crucified while Kathy watched the video. That damn clone of that damn soccer Barbie recorded the entire conversation. At least one question was answered. The clone turned out to be the bitch's daughter, which made the situation even worse. Bullard Chevrolet, Dallas, Texas, owner's office. "Hello, Michael. To what do I owe this honor?" Danny had to smile and make a kind face even though he felt like killing someone. Anyone. "Hey, Danny. Look, I'll get right to the point. After watching Deadline America last night, we're announcing the cancellation of your loan." He was glad Danny couldn't see the smile on his face. Michael didn't know Jack McCloud personally, but he was an Army Ranger, just like Michael. Rangers lead the way. "What? You can't do that. It's $3 million. I don't have that kind of money, and besides, you have no right to name it. My account at Phoenix is in perfect order. Under our last equity agreement, we have the right to revoke your loan under certain conditions. One of them is if your reputation becomes detrimental to our brand, which it has. But most importantly, if you lose the right to sell dealer franchises on the manufacturer's brand." "What the hell are you talking about?" Danny exclaimed. "We're still Bullard Chevrolet and we're going to stay Bullard Chevrolet." "Did you talk to Ken Hodges today?" Michael asked. Ken Hodges was the vice president of franchise operations at the Chevrolet dealership. Although he didn't really report to Ken Hodges, the latter could make or break the dealership. "No, I didn't talk to that damn Ken Hodges today." Danny paced around his office. His head was splitting and he felt nauseous in his stomach. He was standing in front of his office door when he heard a knock on that door. He was about to angrily tell whoever it was to get the hell out, but stopped when he saw the figure standing in the doorway. He carefully put the phone receiver in its holder and said, "Hello, Ken. What can I do for you?" Bullard House, Dallas, Texas. All Danny wanted was a double scotch and some peace and quiet. All he got was a mouthy bitch with a shitty temper. "Did you read the list of Emmy nominees that came out today?" Was the first thing out of Katie's mouth. Danny took a big sip of whiskey before answering. "When the hell do you think I have time to pay attention to nonsense like that? I'm working 80 hours a week trying to keep this place going as an independent dealer. What the hell do I care about some damn TV show?" Danny finished the rest of his scotch and headed to the bar for a refill. "Jack was nominated for an Emmy for Best Actor in a miniseries. Can you believe it? I wish I'd missed the chance to be on set during the filming of his book and meet all those famous actors. You made me miss the chance to go to the award ceremony," she said with anger in her voice. Tears came to Katie's eyes. She didn't even get a chance to go to the Beef and Butter Gala. A $300,000 donation and she wasn't even invited to the gala, she thought bitterly. But an Emmy? That was almost as important as the Oscars, and she'd ruined it. Her ex-husband had suddenly become famous and was all over the news for his portrayal of Robert Bonham. His novel was re-released and became a bestseller. Last week, she had read an article online that Jack had landed the role of Hollywood hottie Gary Cleveland's brother in a major motion picture. She should be with Jack. She pictured the two of them going to dinner in Cannes with Gary and his glamorous lawyer wife. This could be her life. God, she was so confused. The Emmy Awards, Microsoft Theater, Los Angeles, California. The series The Lawyers received a total of 10 Emmy Award nominations. Mark Tibbs received a nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Miniseries. Maria Elena Montoya received a nomination for Best Actress in a Miniseries, and retired Brigadier General Jack McCloud received a nomination for Best Actor in a Miniseries. No one was surprised when both Mark and Maria Elena won. Likewise, no one was surprised when Jack didn't win. When the winner's name was called, Jack smiled crookedly and applauded along with the rest of the audience. He didn't even bother to write a congratulatory speech. Of all the things that had happened to Jack during this whirlwind year, the best was the growing closeness between him and Maria Elena. Sitting next to him in the Microsoft movie theater, she looked at him with adoration and he smiled back at her. There was no need to say anything. They kept their budding romance a secret. The only person who knew of his feelings for Maria Elena was Kelsey, although out of the corner of his eye he saw Tyler smirking at him. Kelsey was excited about their relationship. She wanted Jack to put a ring on them right now. Kelsey was coming home for a few weeks for the summer and wanted to get to know Mariah better. It had been almost 2 years since her parents had divorced and Kelsey had only talked to her mother a few times. She'd never visited her once. She needed another woman in the family. Jack McLeod's house, Round Rock, Texas. Jack was surprised to hear the doorbell ring. He spent so little time in his house that he couldn't understand how anyone knew he was home. The girls had gone shopping and still hadn't returned. He was going through papers and packing up his things to move when the doorbell rang. When he opened the door and saw the caller, he was shocked and even a little alarmed. "Kathy?" he said without a shadow of warmth. "Hi, Jack. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Kathy didn't look well. She had a haggard look and a pale complexion. Jack breathed a sigh of relief. "Sure, come on in. You know the way." Kathy sat down in the chair that had once belonged to her. Tears came to her eyes at the memory of it. Jack sat down in his usual chair. It seemed different to him. He hadn't been home in months, and the cushions had returned to their usual state. They were no longer snug around his ass. The strangest thoughts come to mind at the strangest times, he pondered. "You're selling the house. Why are you selling it? I loved that house." Katie's eyes were wet with tears. "I don't really spend much time here. I bought land west of Austin, and I'm building a house there. I bought horses, and that's where I plan to spend my time when I'm not on set. I've watched you on television. I even saw the movie you were in with Gary Cleveland. You were so good, Jack. Why didn't you ever try to become an actor when we were married?" Jack shook his head at the ridiculousness of the question. "In case you've forgotten, I was too busy serving as an officer in the United States Army. Acting wasn't part of my plans then. Nor is it now, unless my agent contracts me for 3 movies in the next 2 years." Kathy's eyes widened at such a revelation. It only reinforced her decision. "I wanted to tell you how sorry I am for everything I've done. I had everything I wanted and I threw it all away." She began to sob, looking down at her clenched hands. "I'm so sorry. I want you to know that I divorced Danny. You'll never have to worry about him again." Kathy let Jack's exclamation pass her ears. "All right, Kathy. I forgive you. It's water under the bridge. It's nothing scary, nothing bad. It's water off a duck's back. Don't worry about it. We're all right." Jack stood up. "Was there anything else? Do you think there's a chance?" She was interrupted by voices coming from the kitchen. The girls were back early, Jack thought. As they rounded the corner, Katie was shocked to see her daughter accompanied by an obviously pregnant Hispanic woman who appeared to be several years older than Kelsey. The woman was gorgeous, and Katie wondered who she was. Their laughter and chatter stopped abruptly when they noticed the guest. "Mom," Kelsey admitted without the slightest emotion. "What brings you back from Hades?" "Kels," cautioned her father, "be polite to your mother." "Have a seat, ladies. Katie was just asking me a question." He nodded toward Kathy. "You were saying—" Katie took a deep breath. If she was going to grovel and humiliate herself, she might as well do it in front of her daughter, but doing it in front of some pregnant Mexican woman? She didn't care about that. "Kelsey, it's been years since we've seen each other, so I don't know all your friends. Would you like to introduce me?" "I'm sorry, Mom. You've always been up on Hollywood gossip, so I thought you'd recognize her." "Kathy, is it Bullard or Bascom?" "Either way, Katie, this is Maria Elena Montoya. She's my friend, but more importantly, she's my father's fiancée and the mother of my future little sister. Maria Elena Montoya, meet the dumbest woman in America." Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.